Good morning, good afternoon, and happy Wednesday to everyone. Thank you for joining us for our first webinar of the year. For those of you joining for the first time, my name is Irina Chismaș and I'm Head of Marketing at Castify. And today I have the pleasure of welcoming Shawn Riedel, a seasoned customer success coach and consultant, to discuss how to kick off the year on the right foot in customer success. Shawn, thank you for accepting my invitation and being here with us today.
Yeah, excited to be here. This is going to be fun.
Of course. Before we begin, I want to cover a few housekeeping items. The webinar will be recorded and all the registered attendees will receive a link to the recording. Feel free to post any questions you have using the question section bottom right of your device. We are not going to share any fancy presentation today, so we didn't allocate a proper Q&A session at the end of the talk. We'll take the questions as they come. I suggest we wait for a few minutes for the late joiners, and I want to take those the minutes to ask you, Shawn, because you've been basically working in this industry for a very long time, from the moment when customer success, it wasn't actually a thing, to share with us one thing that it remained the same for all those years, and one thing that fundamentally changed and had a positive impact on its evolution.
Yeah, that is two great questions. To your point, I've been around this space, and sometimes I think that I've forgotten more than some people remember about customer success, because there was a time when we did it across the entire company. We just didn't know what it was called, and we didn't have a common vernacular, but we were doing those things just in a very disjointed way. So I would say that something that has stayed the same, and everyone's going to be able to relate to this, is that customers make irrational decisions. It does not matter how great your ROI is, how great the business case is, how much value you provide, they will still make irrational decisions. And the way to get past that is to just appreciate customers make irrational decisions. And then it becomes a matter of almost a marketing mindset of it's time to nurture this customer. The time wasn't right for the message that I was presenting, so let's go back and nurture this some more. Something that has changed was exactly the concept of we pulled customer success into a vernacular. We created a nomenclature. We created a data set. We've got a schema, if you will, of all of these terms and processes and customer life cycle. Now, we will continue to debate those as the industry evolves and as we grow up, but that has been very helpful for us to, at least on the post-sale side of the conversation, all speak the same language. Now the challenge as we move into 2023 and forward is pushing that message further up the chain. It's getting into the pre-sales conversation. It's getting into the product fit conversation, the early marketing conversation, and then of course getting customer success as a philosophy in the C-suite versus just a departmental function. So by us coming up with this thing that we labeled customer success, that was a big improvement, and now we can all talk to each other.
Thank you for sharing, and I think it's a very nice way to start today's topic. I remember back in December when we decided the angle and the theme. You mentioned one thing that, and you were totally right. You basically told me, Irina, it is too late to discuss end of January about the plans, the priorities. We are already late to that party, and you were right. But on the other hand, I want to share statistics that I found from PricewaterhouseCoopers, which basically said that 14% of companies successfully execute on their strategic plans. If you flip it, that means 86% of the companies fail to execute on their strategic plans one way or another. So I want to ask you guys, the ones that are basically joining us live as we speak, to vote in a poll that I'm gonna display as you should see it on your screens. And I want to ask you, how have your customer success plans for January evolved so far? Did they completely changed, slightly adjusted, or remained unchanged? And let's take a few moments for the vote. And while we vote, I also encourage you all to develop a bit on your answers. Use the chat or the questions and see what happened. I'm curious if the plans in Q4 remain the same, slightly changed. We are seeing the distribution up until now. We have 48% slightly adjusted. We have 30% completely changed, and 22% remain unchanged. We'll start commenting on those. Let's give it a few more minutes. Does it surprise you, Shawn, that things change along the way, and Q4 plans or the things that we discussed last year, they are in some cases already no longer available?
Yeah, so a famous person once said that culture eats strategy for lunch every day. So a lot of plans probably change because of culture. Either the culture is not good at change, they are saturated by change, or there is almost a disdain for the leadership when an edict comes down and it's contrary to the direction that we want to go. So culturally, we keep doing our own thing and not necessarily paying attention to this thing that we've been directed as an organization to go do. So that's one element of not making the plan that you've agreed to. I would think, and I would say, and this probably leads into the rest of our chat today, 2023 is going to be a very different year. It's going to be new to a lot of people. Those plans that we made at the end of Q4, maybe it started in September or October, the labor market, the economy was very different. And now we're heading into an economic headwind that probably changed a lot of plans. So that is another indicator that things are going to be different this year. I would say that one of the questions that I saw in the lead up to this was that how do you stick to your plan? Well, I think the key to sticking to your plan is to limit the things that you're going to do. Do 3 to 5 things really well. Don't try to do 10 things not so well. And make sure that those 3 to 5 things align with what the C-suite is trying to do for the organization. That way, your plans are always going to be in alignment with what they're doing. Now, if they have the old corporate ADHD and they change directions frequently, well, then the onus is to create a culture that can absorb that change, that can be nimble, can move quickly. So yeah, I think those are the 2 things that are going to lead to people not being able to execute on the plans they laid out in Q4 in 2023.
We already have a comment from Garner Stewart, who said, we started with the goal of only focusing on customer success and not revenue. But my manager said we are being viewed as a cost center and need to prove our value through dollars as a budget cuts loom with the economy. I think this is something that it's a topic, it's a thing now. How does customer success basically fight for proving that it's not a cost center, it's basically a revenue generating unit?
Yeah, I think that question, someone previewed my notes for this session. So that'll definitely feed into something that we've got, that I've got in the information a little bit later on. The first thing that I want to do is I want to level set a little bit about why 2023 is going to be different. Uh, there's bad news and there's good news, right? The bad news is that there are a lot of surveys out there that will tell us, on average, about 50% of CEOs say that they are considering cuts in the next year. Another survey that I saw says that about 20% of companies say they're going to reduce staff in the next year. The good news is that these aren't all high-tech companies. These aren't all tech-space companies, right? That we are a fraction of that. And the echo chamber that is LinkedIn, and the algorithm that we are all subject to on LinkedIn, is just like Facebook, right? If you watch videos of cute kittens, you're going to get videos of cute kittens in your feed. If you are constantly reading the post about the person at Google who is no longer at Google, you are going to get fed posts about people who've lost their jobs. So you are going to get this bias that the entire world is falling down around us, and it isn't true. And what I'm not saying is don't have the empathy for our fellow customer success people and not read their posts. Just realize that you are being fed their posts because those are the posts that you're reading. So the news isn't all bad. They're customer success roles are among the least affected by layoffs when you look across all of tech. The highest proportion of people who are being laid off are sales and marketing. And then, of course, sorry about that, Irina.
Yeah.
Followed by the R&D HR. So CS is probably one of the least affected. CEOs are cutting costs, but they're cutting costs on travel and leases of software. Well, wow, that's the one that affects us, right? That's the one we have to keep in mind, is that CEOs are cutting leases of softwares, and that's going to come back to us here in a little bit. I would say looking forward, what they are anticipating is mixed growth and an increased EBITDA. Now, if you don't know what EBITDA is, that is the earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. It's kind of wonky, but it's what CEOs are looking at. They really want to control costs, and they hope that that will offset the lack of new logo that they're not going to be seeing. Now, if you look across the help wanted ads on LinkedIn, you're going to see overwhelmingly 5, 6, 7 to 1 sales to customer success. So there is still a predominant thought out there that if I hire more salespeople, I'm going to get more growth. And that's where we come in. That's how we have to now start to show that growth is the way that we grow the company. And we do that through customer success. And we'll talk more about that. Ultimately, customer success headcount is growing. There is about 48% of companies out there are maintaining headcount, and about 44% are growing headcount. So there's good news as we head into 2023. Okay, so I don't want this to be my LinkedIn feed wrecks my day every day because I'm just seeing all this doom and gloom. It's just the algorithm is feeding you what you read. So know that it's not the case. There is good news out there. So what's the main thing that we need to do differently in 2023? We have been taught over our customer success life cycle that value. We've got to go promote value. We've got to go promote value. And I would contend that in 2023, you have to put value aside. Value is not going to make a lot of difference to the person who's actually making the decisions in 2023. That person is the CFO. And in a lot of our customer journeys, we don't even put the CFO persona on there because they've never been involved before. But now it makes sense to go revisit our customer journeys and figure out, where is the CFO involved in all of this? And what we also have to appreciate is that CFOs are surrounded by a team of procurement people in larger companies, and sometimes even in smaller companies, the CFO is the procurement person. They are looking at priority. What softwares, what solutions are mission critical to me keeping the doors open, keeping the business going. So what we have to pivot towards in customer success in 2023 is this idea of becoming a priority on the CFO's list, not value. It doesn't matter how much time you saved, how much cost you reduced, how much throughput you gained through a solution or a service. The CFO doesn't care about that. They care about what is a priority. And those priorities, interestingly enough, typically start to align with what the CEO said that we need to go do in the next 3, 6, 12 months. So my advice to the customer success community is, let's move away from value, because we know how to do that, or we're trying to know how to do that. But let's start to focus on getting to that CFO, or that person who makes the actual economic decision, and show that our solutions are a priority. And we do that by aligning our solutions with that corporate goal that the CEO has. So if the CEO's goal is to go to IPO next year, how does my solution, even a departmental solution can impact a corporate goal? How does my solution impact my ability to go to IPO next year? That's going to make you a priority. How do I craft that story and show that economic buyer that I am actually helping them move their company further down the line, not just helping some department with some problem that they had? Does that make sense, Irina?
Yes, it makes sense, and I think it's the first. But to be honest, it's the first time when I hear that. Okay, we should move away from value, and we should basically talk to the economic buyer. So that's a very, I would say, bold statement, and an interesting piece of advice for today. Let's get into details on more specific things. How do we basically do that? And for instance, for smaller companies, for companies that are not necessarily say startups, but small to mediums. How do they make sure that they are becoming a priority for the customers of their customers, so that they remain in the books?
The key to that is making sure, and this takes homework. It's not a conversation that sometimes, and if we're talking about layers, we know that there are the organizations that we sell to, that we service, that it's the same persona. The owner is the buyer, is the user, is the tech support. They're all those things. That's, of course, an easier conversation to have. But when we start to get into the matrixed organization, when we start to get into the layered organization, the person that we're dealing with on a daily basis may or may not be the CFO. It may or may not be a director or a VP. We've got these personas that we've mapped out in our customer journey. And ideally, we want to start asking questions about how is the person that we deal with on a day-to-day basis, how are they going to defend us when someone comes back and says, you know what, we need to get rid of that solution. Now, the question that I take back to my contact is, how can I help you defend me? And I'm going to guide them. I'm going to lead them to the water by saying, how are you measured? When you have a business review internally with your management, what is it that they want to know? What needle do you need to be moving for them? And what needle do you need to be moving for your boss's boss? Right? You start to get those questions up the chain. The other way you help them with that messaging is that you go read their financial statements. If they're a publicly traded company, they have annual reports, they have 4Qs, they have 10Ks. All of that is going to give you insights into what are the priorities for this organization. And then the hard part comes in of, how do I tie my solution to those priorities? That sometimes takes a bit of creativity, and don't give up on it if you're a departmental solution that you think is only helping them shave off minutes or, format invoices. There's some way that you're helping to move a corporate needle. So Don't give up on how do I help this C-suite advance whatever their initiatives are. Another great place to look, of course, are earnings calls, because in the earnings calls, you learn a lot about what's going to happen in the near term. For instance, for those of you that follow Microsoft, Microsoft had an incredible quarter, except they gave guidance that 2023, the rest of the year, isn't going to be very good. So for 15 minutes, Microsoft stock was up $20. And then as soon as they got the guidance that they don't expect 2023 to be very good, their stock took a nosedive. But that tells me a lot about how I'm going to go talk to Microsoft. They appreciate that they don't think things are going to be that great next year. How am I going to help them soften that landing? Right? That's how I move myself into the priority column.
And for the companies that are not publicly listed, or for the companies who are not so transparent in terms of financials, which are the signs for the smaller companies, which you do have in your portfolio? Which are the signs? How do you get a sense of their priorities?
Mm-hmm. The main way you do that is you ask people questions that you know they can't answer, because they have to bring in somebody else to answer that question. And we're all very busy, and we don't want to be the go-between to go have questions answered by other people and then funnel it back to the CSM. So most of the time, your person will put you in contact with that other person. And now you can start to have a dialogue and ask the harder questions. The other thing that I would recommend is that understand in the organizations that you're servicing with your product, who does your contact give data to, and who does your contact get data from? That way you now have a linear view of how your product fits into the overall workflow and data flow of the organization. Because at the end of it, it is all about the data. I may be an invoicing tool, but I'm getting data from somewhere and I'm providing data to somebody. So there are internal customers that I want to make sure I understand as well. And when you understand those internal customers, you also get great insight into what are the priorities. My departmental function might have this priority, but it's only because somebody upstream from me needs something else. So now I tie myself into another priority.
You mentioned something about moving the needle and having an impact, and it's not a secret that customer success has a lot on its plate. So my question is, how do we make sure that we are working on the things that move the needle? How do we jungle and prioritize so that we have an impact? Because at the end of the day, it's not about just keeping ourselves busy, because that's an easy job. And I think it's very hard for customer success to basically focus on the things that do have an impact, because they have a lot. So how do we make sure?
So impact is measured in two ways, we all know. First way is anecdotally, right? I saved this customer. We had a great turnout for the webinar. But those impact anecdotes do not get us any priority in the earlier cost center versus profit center conversation. We're still going to be viewed as a cost center because nobody sees the actual value, right? There we are in the value of what we're doing. So how do we become a priority, right? We're doing this internally as well. We as customer success need to be doing what we're doing with our customers to our internal customers. Turn customer success inward and use the same practices and philosophies with your own people. So one of the things that I would recommend is we try to become impact that is viewed as a profit center is ICP. And that's always a hot topic, right? The ideal customer profile. One of the things that we need to do differently in 2023 is we need to appreciate that ICP is a noble cause, but in reality, and especially in a year like this, it's not the reality. There is no sales rep that is going to walk away from an open wallet, regardless of what we tell them the best customer is. So given that reality, we need to open up our ICP and understand how can we make these customers successful. That, for me, screams revenue opportunity. Now I've got the makings of a business case to have a monetized option where I can offer customers a paid version to make them successful. I realize that in all honesty, they may not have the technical wherewithal, they may not have the organizational maturity, uh, but I need to make them successful because we sold to them. I can't just complain that we keep signing bad fit customers. I have to figure out how to make the majority of those bad fit customers good customers. So, as I mentioned, I see that as a revenue opportunity to come up with a paid offering that brings these customers to be advocates, because quite honestly, the customers that you nurture the most will become your biggest fans. Now, I remember when we were setting up for this, one of the questions was, is there any customer that you wouldn't sell to?
Yeah.
And yeah, of course there is, right? There is the customer that is in financial trouble, going through a bankruptcy, or you get the signs that, they're not paying their bills on time. I'm probably not going to sell to them. And the other customer I'm not going to sell to is the one whose use case makes my software do unnatural things, right? It sounds good, and sure, theoretically it could do that. But unless I have other customers doing it, unless I can prove the use case, I'm not going to sell to them either, because that's doomed. Now, some folks might say, well, you got to start somewhere. Okay, well, go start that one for free, right? Let somebody else go start that one. That's probably a customer I'm not going to sell to. But otherwise, I am looking to make those not necessarily ICP customers successful, because those sales reps aren't going to stop selling to them, and me complaining about it isn't going to make it any better. So let me turn it on its head, make it a positive, create a revenue generating opportunity out of it, and create more advocates out of it. So that's one thing that I think we can do to create more impact is, right, stop complaining about the ICP and let's just get to work, right? Put our heads down and figure out how can we get these clients to be successful.
That was my aha moment when we basically discussed it, because as a marketer, I was always focused on this ICP, and we were always having discussions as marketers, the classic discussion between marketing, sales, and customer success, and basically moving from one department to another. No, this was not ICP. Why did you target those customers? Okay, sales, of course, will basically close, because they are hunters. They will hunt and they will try to bring whatever, and then everything falls on the customer success. And it was always like, okay, who do we blame in the whole thing? But I never thought that, okay, the discussion of the ICP is no longer available in the following years. So, okay, let's see how we solve this issue. So definitely, as a marketer, for me, it was an aha moment.
Yeah, and let's create a customer journey for those people. And that, yes, absolutely, they're going to need to be serviced a little bit differently, and it's going to take more time, and it's going to take more resources. And I've got to come up with more rudimentary educational videos and in-app messaging. But it's a journey nonetheless that, as I mentioned, those are the people who are going to become your greatest advocates. The other thing that we all know is that, the elephant in the room around customer success is that sales has a quota, therefore they're profit centers, and customer success doesn't have a quota, therefore they are cost centers. Some folks might not like this view of the world, but I am a firm believer that customer success needs to start taking responsibility for some revenue, because that is the only way that we are going to be taken seriously in the C-suite. The anecdotes about all the customers we're saving and all the great use cases and marketing assets that we're developing, none of that is quantifiable. We have to be able to say we impacted X dollars of revenue, and here's how we did it. Ideally, you start to develop in a crawl, walk, run way this concept of customer success qualified leads, CSQLs. We in CS are the most positioned to have consultative conversations with our customers about what's next. And in our success planning, we should be coming up with business-driven roadmaps that lay out a path for several years with our solution to our customers. If I'm only a one module product right now, well, then the business-driven roadmap is pretty easy. If I'm an Oracle and I have hundreds of products in the catalog, I have a lot more flexibility in creating that business driven roadmap and helping lead them to where I want them to go. And every so often, if it's biannually, if it's quarterly, I'm revisiting that roadmap and I'm saying, does this still make sense? Because now we've got accountability on both sides as to how we're going to proceed. And a success plan isn't just, what are your goals? Did I help you meet those goals? No. I'm going to prescribe a roadmap that matches the things that your CEO is trying to do, right? Because my whole goal is to move the needle on a corporate initiative. And how does my solution help you get that? Here's the success plan. And that will help me drive conversations further down the road. The CSQL is either a wrapped in a bow lead that I hand off to someone who is skilled at objection handling, negotiations, redlining, quoting, deal desk, right? How much of that do we all know as customer success managers? Very little. Will the day come that we probably need to be upskilled in that? Yes. But for now, let's give to sales a wrapped in a bow lead. And if they can't close it, we have a different conversation to have because we gave them everything. We positioned it, we roadmapped it. The sales rep knew we roadmapped it because we're doing joint account planning. So they know that, hey, this is going to be coming and I'm going to be working them down this path of the business-driven roadmap. But let's give them a wrapped in a bow lead that they just need to close. And we need to keep track of that. So when that lead ends up in your CRM, every CRM has a lead source. And that lead source can be CS, right? Or CSQL. And we're going to track that lead source. And we're going to track the revenue associated with that lead source. And you know what else we're going to track? Because we're going to hold sales feet to the fire. We're going to track lost, closed on that lead source because we want to find out how much money did we lose off of leads that customer success provided, right? Cost avoidance is almost as powerful as cost attainment. So let's go ahead and track what happened to those leads, not just, hey, these are all the leads we contributed. So that would be one of the things I would add this year is the implementation of customer success qualified leads. That's helping us to document where are we actually contributing to revenue. And then my friend Peter Armley, who I think you guys all saw last month, Peter and I talk all the time. And one of the things that Peter said, hey, don't forget, remember when we used to do performance appraisals and what a pain in the behind it was when you'd get that email a few weeks before the meeting and it would say, hey, go fill out this whole thing of all the things you did all year. And now we're going to talk about it in our one-on-one. And it's not going to get you a promotion and it's not going to get you a raise, but it is going to get you, an appraisal of meets expectations, right? None of us like to do that. Well, the reason that we don't like to do that is because we don't journal throughout the year what we did, right? A lot of us have, we don't necessarily talk to our managers one-on-one every week or every other week about the things we've accomplished. So as a customer success organization, we have to start journaling what it is that we're doing to make an impact to revenue. Did we have a customer use case that closed a deal? Journal it, right? Did we provide X number of CSQLs? Journal it. How many of those closed? Journal it. Start keeping a journal or a performance review of what we did in CS. It feels like extra work, but it's no different than what sales has to do every single week on the Monday morning call when they've got to talk about their forecast. Right? It's just that extra layer of accountability. And let's also create a culture where sharing bad news isn't bad. Right? I'm a firm believer that you escalate early, you escalate without remorse. And in a lot of organizations, even ones that I've been a part of, everyone held on to their bad news. And what happens when you hold on to your bad news is that leadership then gets surprised by the bad news. And I'm not sure which is worse, the chief customer officer being surprised by a churn or me just not telling them about the churn, right? That those two things are equally bad. So as leaders, we have to create a culture where it's okay to escalate early on a red flag. If your executive sponsor leaves an account, escalate. Mm-hmm. That's a red flag. If you notice that a customer who is not seasonal has a dip in usage, red flag, escalate. Don't try to solve the problem yourself. Escalate it right away so that we can swarm it and we can try to help you fix it. If you try to fix it yourself, we get to the end, you've incurred an incredible amount of stress. We have now a compressed runway to try and fix the problem, and it never works out well. So let's escalate early. Let's swarm a problem, and let's go ahead and fix it as a group because we've all got better ideas. I may have done a lot of things in my customer success career, but I am always looking for a way to shorten the time or increase efficiency, and somebody's going to have a great idea. Let's swarm these red accounts versus holding on to the bad news. This all plays into what impact can we have, right? When I solve problems early, I'm having incredible impact because CS can now focus on proactive activities instead of being reactive. And what is proactive? Proactive is becoming a priority. Proactive is driving the business-driven roadmap and the success plan. Those are the things that are priorities.
You received a question. Gardner asked, at what cost do you support bad fit customers? Do you change your product to align with an industry you are not in just to make them happy for the short term?
So that question almost feels like some of the bad fit customers have use cases that are not natural fits, which would be the time when I would say we're probably not the best solution for you. Or there is a huge maturity gap between my technology and what this customer can do, right? If it's the one persona customer, we know right away whether or not that customer is going to be a good fit. And that might be the case where I'm going to suggest this additional monetized customer success option that says, I realize that this might be a little too technical for you, but I see where you're going to get value. I see where it's going to help you. And that efficiency that you're going to gain more than offsets this $75 an hour for this CS tech person to help you become successful. Then, of course, we all have to decide if we don't have that monetized offering or if we don't have that additional bandwidth, where do we cut them off? And that's going to be, to my friend Ed Powers, and it depends. Is this a logo that you think that will benefit you? Is this a customer who has a lot of white space or a lot of upside? You'll make those determinations.
Another question is, how can we haste the onboarding process?
So onboarding is a very interesting. It's an interesting place because it's what happened. It's where churn starts. And I always like to say to folks, if you can't onboard my mom, your product is too hard. So we want to go back into our onboarding methodologies and determine what is the lowest common denominator? Because nobody has ever complained about the instruction manual being too easy, right? They always complained that the instruction manual was too hard. So let's look at our onboarding and how can we redo it for the lowest common denominator for our weakest fit customers. And then it's easy to skip ahead for those folks that get it, or it's actually even better for when you stick that onboarding material into a self-service portal, because then it's easier to do by yourself. So now I can even offload some of my onboarding to the digital channel.
I want to address one of the things that we said we were gonna talk about the things
Sure.
that you need to have at the beginning of the year. Those things that are somehow mandatory for you to start on the right foot. Let's review them, and if they are on the roadmap, good. But let's have one overview and make sure that we don't forget those critical things that you really need to have.
So Lincoln Murphy reminded me of one this morning that I totally forgot about, that has bitten me in the behind more times than I care to remember. And that is number one thing that we should be thinking about as we go into a new year is there going to be a price increase? Because customer success is always the last to know. Sometimes our customers know about the price increase before we do. We want to get as far ahead of that conversation as we can. And in this year of 2023, where companies are looking for ways to generate more revenue, there are going to be price increases. And it doesn't seem to make sense, right? Our customers are trying to cut back and we're trying to raise prices. But those two things are going to have to coexist, and we're going to have to get good at those conversations. One is the concession conversation, and two is let's get ahead of the price increase. So that means proactively, we go to finance, we go to product, we go to marketing, and we develop a communication plan. How are we going to do this? Because there's nothing worse than product and finance saying, you know what, we're raising prices 10%. You guys go figure it out. No. We need to understand all of the things, the permutations of negative that can happen from this, and how do we handle those objections. We need to have that price increase objection playbook already written if we see that there's going to be a price change in this coming year. So I would encourage all CS leaders on this call to go ask that question. Do you foresee that we are going to have a price increase this year? Let's get ahead of it. Along with that, I would say that the other thing we want to make sure we're doing is communicating our change plan for the entire year. These are the changes that we are going to expect in process, technology, procedure, maybe even people. And quarterly, let's break them down. I know the question was earlier, we talked about if we've got this extra budget, what do we spend it on? You know what we spend it on? We spend it on a CS ops person. We forego one or two CSMs to get a CS ops person, because that CS operations person can make the difference in speed to these changes. They can make the difference in a speed to adoption of technology. That is the role that the head of CS, the VP of CS, those are the things that they don't have time to deal with. We often get pulled into escalations. Then we become the face of support and of implementation and of CS. There's not time to go manage the rollout of a platform or the workflow of hooking a database to a piece of technology. And that CS ops person can look across the organization and be the CSM for customer success. Their role is to create a business-driven roadmap, show where customer success is providing value, help us become a proactive organization. I would venture to guess, and I haven't surveyed this, I'm just going anecdotally, that most organizations with a CS ops person are probably very proactive in their CS approach. And without a ops person, they're probably very reactive. I just know the benefit of what I've done in my past in CS ops as being that CSM to the entire customer success organization. So let's communicate our year's worth of changes ahead of time. We got to have the stakeholder maps figured out. We have to understand the WIFM, right? The what's in it for me. And we also have to appreciate, and this might be new for some folks, is we all know that when humans grieve, there are 7 stages. Well, when we change something that someone has a vested interest in, those stages of grieving actually kick in. So we have to appreciate that our CSMs are going to grieve the loss of something, even if it's something we don't like, because we've grown accustomed to it. So build into your change plan the appreciation of those 7 stages of grief, and let's move our CSMs past that. What it all helps to do is create a culture where we expect change and we embrace change versus a change adverse, change saturated culture. And then, of course, right, we mentioned earlier, pick 3 to 5 things to do really well and don't try to do 10 things poorly, because that will affect your change plan as well.
I wanna ask you something. How do you
Sure.
strike a balance between being flexible and responsive to change while still maintaining a consistent and effective strategy for your customer success work?
Yeah, so changing the tires on a moving car is never a good idea, but it happens. And when it happens, the balance becomes understanding disruption. And for anybody who's ever taken any change management coursework before, you understand that there's this thing called the change curve. And we've got the status quo of, this is what the curve looks like if we just keep going the way we're going. And then we've got this change curve of here's the change that we're trying to implement. But we know that there's going to be a drop off in efficiency, productivity, whatever the case may be. The balance is mitigating that change curve, drawing that as close as possible to a lack of disruption. And the way that happens is by 1, over communicating what it is we're trying to do, and 2, by making sure that we understand all of our stakeholders, because there is nothing that will wreck a change more than this obscure stakeholder up here in the upper left hand corner that just wants to snipe at your change and wreck it, right? That's the person you have to make sure that's neutral or passive, or that understands, hey, this is why we're doing this. So my advice to everyone is the balancing act becomes in mitigating the disruption. Don't worry so much about what is the change. Worry about how do I keep it as little disruption as possible so that everybody can maintain their high level of performance.
How do you navigate competing priorities and demands from different stakeholders within your organizations? Because you mentioned this.
Yeah, ideally you always manage up, right? We know that we have our direct managers, but everything we do, we're managing up a couple more levels. Some competing priorities you don't necessarily get a choice in, right? My ultimate advice is if the priority is the person whose name is on the bottom of your paycheck, well, they're probably going to come first, right? They're going to come first. Outside of that, then what you have to decide is the impact of that priority on your ability to deliver the customer experience that you've promised your customers. If changing your priority affects your ability to deliver on that customer experience, then that needs to be escalated. And you need to express the why. I like to look at everything as a business case. If somebody says this is now your priority, what I want to understand is the business case. Mm-hmm. Show me or explain to me how this is going to benefit our customers. show me, explain to me what's in it for me, right? There, because when I have a priority and all of a sudden I have another priority, there's stages of grief that I have to go through because I was prepared to execute flawlessly on the first priority. So I really want to understand it from a business perspective. How is this helping the business? Then, how is this helping my customer? And if I can't get those two things to coincide, I probably want to raise my hand and present why I think that this isn't a good idea. If I don't have a choice, then I don't have a choice. Then I've got to either provide less of an experience to my other customers so that I can go manage this priority, or I've just got to burn the candle at both ends, which is how we get to this whole idea of quiet quitting, right? Now I'm trying to pacify all of these competing priorities, and I'm burning myself out because I'm not pushing back. And not everybody is built to push back. But if you step away from it and look at it from an analytical perspective, if you try to just put two columns on a piece of paper, fact and emotion, and you start to write down, why is this affecting you? Why are these two competing priorities giving me angst? Here's the facts, here's the emotions. Scratch out the emotions, go to the facts, and that's now your case to go back to management and say, these are the reasons why I don't think this is going to work. As long as you have that open, right, that culture of sharing bad news isn't bad, then that's a real easy conversation to have. If you have, if you live in a totalitarian organization where edicts come from on high and you're just told, I'm sure that quiet quitting has crossed your mind a lot of times. But remember, the earlier conversation today around ICP is that you are where you are. So how can you make a positive out of it, right? Almost the Sun Tzu art of competing priorities, right? Make the enemy of my priority my priority. So I would say, in my past, I had a manager at one time that we really didn't get along, and it was not going to work. And I was going to work every day just dreading it. And I started to read Sun Tzu, The Art of War, and it occurred to me, wait, if I treat this person like they think I really enjoy working with them, I wonder if that will make things any better. And lo and behold, that person became really easy to work with. I still didn't enjoy working for them, but that was the game of it, right? It was making them think that I enjoyed working for them. So it gave it purpose. So in a roundabout way, that is, a way that we can deal with competing priorities that just don't talk to each other. But ideally, you want to start to foster that cross-pillar collaboration so that everybody appreciates customer success is not just a function. It's a philosophy, and we're all responsible for it. Although me, the CSM, I'm going to be the quarterback, and I'm going to help you understand where it is that product and marketing and finance and legal and all those personas fit into our customer success org. Remember, we talked earlier about turning customer success inward. And that is a great homework project for everyone, is to say, how do I treat my company as a customer? And what of my customer success tactics and strategies can I use internally?
Before we wrap up the conversation, there are two more things that I wanna address. Let's discuss a bit about the mistakes that you saw in the planning exercises, so that we make sure we avoid them. So let's go a bit through this topic as well.
Sure. Let me look at. So I think the common mistakes that we make are, one, we overextend. We create too big of a plan, and therefore it makes it really hard to execute on. The other mistake I think we make is that we don't set advocacy goals at the beginning of the year. And if you've ever followed me on LinkedIn or you read anything that I've written, I'm a big proponent that advocacy begets growth and retention. That equation doesn't work any other way. Just because a customer renews with me doesn't mean they like me and doesn't mean they'll buy more. And just because a customer buys more doesn't mean they're going to renew or that they like me. But if they like me, I am almost guaranteed that they're going to buy more stuff and they're going to keep a relationship with me. So it makes sense that we flip our thinking as customer success organizations from retention, 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 growth, growth, growth. And how do we make all of our customers love us? How do we make them all advocates? And by not establishing advocacy goals for each CSM at the beginning of the year, we lose the opportunity, or we make the conversation awkward about becoming an advocate. And I've always been a big proponent of introducing advocacy even during the sales cycle, with the customer success manager talking to the prospect, or even in early onboarding, just to set the expectation that we're going to be having this conversation. So I believe that we all need to set those advocacy goals, make it part of a management by objectives or an OKR, but every CSM should strive for X percentage of their book of business to be an advocate. It's a lot easier to work that goal than it is to X percentage of your book of business needs to buy something else, or X percentage of your book of business needs to renew, right? Those are two harder numbers to get at. But for me to say 90% of my book of business needs to be referenceable, needs to provide a piece of marketing collateral, needs to do a video for me, needs to have a positive CSAT NPS score, that's a pretty easy goal to go chase after. Now, everything you do to get there is hard, but it's an easier goal for us to all get our heads around. Let's get our customers to love us.
Well, I definitely set it up one of our next webinar themes, and I received the confirmation that we should run an advocacy webinar. So this is actually an open invitation. Most probably somewhere in the second half of this year, I want to officially invite you and do this, run this type of webinar with how do we basically make our customers to love us, how do we go before retention and growth, and most probably it will be an open talk, and I'll find some other guests to complement your discussions. So I think we can count on you on this topic of advocacy and how can we make it work, right?
And I love this conversational format, because I despise nothing more than hundreds of slides and someone flipping through them.
So I thank you for going through all the topics. I want to end up with one last thing, and it's a specific questions, but how do you go again on the topic of how do we stick to our plans? Let's try to formulate an answer for this, and then I would ask you what would be your advice? What would you say to all the CSMs that are here with us to do in this year in order to be successful? So those two things: how to stick to your plans, formulate the answer, and then a closing on a piece of advice for everyone who listened to you today live.
So, key to sticking to your plan, if any of you are scuba divers or have been certified by any of the dive agencies, they always say plan your dive your plan. And that is a very good way to stick to your plans. Is great. First off, create a plan, and then stick to that plan, because you know that by sticking to that plan, you're going to navigate the unforeseen, because you've got a point out on the horizon that you're moving towards. 2023 is going to be an interesting year, so we've got to be ready to pivot. We've got to be ready to go in different directions, but we want to make sure that the plans that we're generating are aligning to what's happening in the C-suite. If the C-suite is changing directions, then our plans are going to change. And we need to make our organizations aware of that, because we need to, as we talked about, how does CS prove impact? And we prove impact by aligning to those executive goals and making the customer success organization track against those executive goals. We know that the basics of customer success are, right, we want to get to a certain retention level. We want to make sure that our NRR is at a certain point. We want to make sure we have the CSAT and NPS. That's all the basic stuff. The thing that takes us above and beyond in the eyes of the boardroom and the C-suite is how are we as an organization impacting those corporate goals? Just like we're trying to prove with our customers, how is our solution impacting what your CEO and your board are trying to do? We need to turn that inward and do it against our own organizations. So don't have too many things. Be nimble and align yourself with your corporate goals. As far as that piece of advice that I would have for all CSMs, keep in mind every day, some days you just dread coming to work because you know that there's this escalation that's going to happen, or it's happening. You've been on the phone all night in a call with support, or you've got this difficult customer. My biggest piece of advice is appreciate. No churn ever happened because of the customer success manager. Churn happens because of something else that's breaking in the organization, and we're responsible for quarterbacking the customer through our own mistake. Now, granted, there are personality conflicts between CSMs and customers, and that can all be trained out. We can become better listeners. We can become better objection handlers. We can read and appreciate crucial conversations. There's a little plug for a book everyone should read. To have conversations about highly charged emotional issues. But for the most part, those things that cause customers to churn weren't because of CS. So do not take it personally. You are nothing more, and I say that tongue in cheek, than the facilitator of the promises that sales made, right? Sales makes promises. Customer success keeps those promises. If there is a mismatch between what sales promised and what the product can actually deliver, that is not your fault. And you have to not internalize, not take it home, and not personalize it. I think one of the biggest causes of CSM burnout is that we care and we take these problems home with us, and we need to appreciate that we are not the cause of them. We are only trying to help.
Shawn, thank you very much for this very inspirational hour that you provided to us. Thank you all who listened to us, who participated into the conversation. You have my LinkedIn profile. You know where to find Shawn. Don't hesitate to get in touch, to ask your questions. I really love the CS community because it's an open environment and everyone tries to help each other. I know that we can have an impact. We can help you. So please talk with us, engage, and we'll make sure that we make ourselves available. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Shawn. And most probably you'll receive another invite for another webinar from us.
This has been a lot of fun and great questions. And if I can be a beacon of anything, it's customer success.
Thank you, everyone. Have an awesome day. Bye all.
Take care.
Bye.